Hey, thanks so much for being here and watching this video. If you enjoy this kind of content, I'd really appreciate it if you subscribed. I'm working toward hitting 1,000 subscribers, and your support truly makes a difference. Don't forget to leave a like so more people can discover this story. Every video I make takes time, effort, and a lot of care just for you. Feel free to share it with your friends and make sure to stick around until the end. I hope you enjoy it. I came home early and overheard my parents trash-talking me with my aunt, so I walked out that day. 3 months later, they finally realized I was gone and had no idea where I'd been. Something had already shifted, and there was no going back. I could feel it the moment I opened the front door, the quiet hitting first, before everything else did. The smell of my mom's pot roast drifted down the hallway, mingling with the metallic clink of silverware. Aunt Carol's voice floated from the kitchen, casual, warm, until my mother said my name. Not in greeting, in dismissal. Emma, if she moved out, I'd finally have peace. The words landed like stones. My dad chuckled, low and careless. She'll never do it. She's too needy. They paused, almost tasting the idea, letting it hang. Aunt Carol murmured about how some kids just never let go. I froze, keys still in my hand. My own home had become a place where my existence was a nuisance, my presence a minor inconvenience. I had come back early, cupcakes in hand, half a day off work tucked into my pocket, ready to surprise them. Instead, I found myself hearing the truth they weren't ready to say aloud. I was expendable. Needy peace. The thought circled in my chest, cold and steady. I retreated quietly, stepping back outside before a floorboard could betray me. I closed the door soft enough for them not to notice. I slid into my car and stared at the house. The same house I'd helped pay for when my dad was unemployed for 8 months. The same house I sacrificed a promotion for because it required moving across states. They wanted peace. Not me. That night, I returned at my usual time. I played my part. Tired, compliant. Mom asked why I looked worn. Dad reminded me to transfer money for the water bill. No one mentioned the words they'd thrown at me in the hallway. That absence, so casual, so invisible, stung more than confrontation ever could. I didn't cry. I didn't argue. I started planning. The next week, I quietly gathered my essentials. Birth certificate, passport, tax records. A new bank account at a branch miles away. Paychecks rerouted. Grocery bills unpaid under the guise of inflation. Dad needed rides to therapy? My schedule had changed. A ride service would cost him. I watched them puzzle it out. No connections made. No suspicion. 2 weeks later, I toured a small studio on the far side of town. Old building, clean hallways. The landlord, Marcus, promised long-term tenants because the place was quiet. Quiet sounded perfect. I signed the lease that afternoon. Tuesday move, both at work. Small van, only what I bought with my own money. Left the rest. Key on the counter. No note, no explanation. If I was extra, I'd erase the extra. The first month was strange. Silence mostly. No one asking, no one commenting. They likely assumed I was staying with friends. Week 2, a text from Mom. Are you coming home tonight? No reply. Week 3, a single call from Dad. I let it ring until it stopped. Month's end, 5 missed calls, 2 terse messages. Are you mad? 3 months in, the message came. Voicemail, not Mom. Aunt Carol, her voice uncertain, probing. Emma, your parents just realized your room is empty. They thought you were working late. Your dad tried to transfer money from your account for the mortgage. It wouldn't go through. What's going on? I played it 5 times, slow, deliberate. They didn't notice I was gone. They noticed the money. And in that moment, clarity struck like a hammer. I wasn't their daughter. I was their backup, their convenience. I didn't call back. Let the voicemail sit, static and unanswered, while I went to work like nothing had shifted. Emails, meetings, nodding at the right moments. Outwardly stable. Inside, something was recalibrating. That night, the phone blew up. First, Mom. I'm aware of you. Dad. Why isn't your account linked anymore? No, we're worried. Just logistics. I flipped the phone face down and made pasta in my tiny kitchen. So small I could reach the sink from the stove without stepping fully. And yet, this cramped studio felt bigger than the house I grew up in. The next morning, 12 missed calls. By noon, David, my manager, leaned over my cubicle. "Two people are here asking for you." Something irreversible had begun, and it wasn't just me. The floor seemed to vanish beneath me as I stepped into the conference room. Through the glass walls, I froze. There they were, my parents, sitting side by side but miles apart in demeanor. Mom's hands gripped her handbag as if it were armor. Dad's eyes never left his phone, scrolling with mechanical focus. They'd never walked into my workspace before, not once in 2 years. I closed the door, the soft click echoing like a shot. Mom rose immediately, heat radiating off her in short bursts. "Why would you do this? Do you understand how terrified we were?" "Terrified of what?" My words landed cold and precise, and her expression flickered, caught off guard by the question. Dad leaned forward, voice clipped. "You cut off the joint account. The mortgage payment didn't go through." Money again. Always money. I exhaled slowly, calm but precise. "I moved out." Her laugh was sharp, incredulous. "No, you didn't." "Yes, I did." The silence after my words stretched too long, heavy and charged. Dad's jaw tightened first, the change subtle but undeniable. "Across town. Why didn't you tell us?" I didn't flinch. "Because I heard everything." Her eyes widened, disbelief painted across her features. "You were listening?" "I came home early." Dad shook his head slowly, the kind of shake that dismisses your reality. "That's taken out of context." "What context?" I pressed. The space between us thickened. Neither had an answer. A gentle knock on the door interrupted the tension, my manager checking in. I said coolly, "I have to get back to work," and turned toward the exit. Mom caught my arm. "You can't just abandon us. We depend on you." Depend on me. For the first time, it hit me. Everything was backward. I'd been the one holding half the household together, managing schedules, paying bills, fixing problems. And now they expected me to fill the cracks in their system. I shook her hand off gently. "I'm not coming back." Dad's voice hardened, low and final. "Fine. Survive on your own if you think you can. But don't expect us to rescue you when it all falls apart." I stayed silent. They stormed out, leaving tension hanging like smoke. That night, I returned to Aunt Carol's voicemail. There was a line I hadn't caught before, quiet but heavy. "Call me back. There's something about the house you need to know." The house. Everything I had assumed about it had seemed stable, untouchable. My parents weren't communicative unless forced, so that sentence carried weight. I waited 2 days before calling her. Not fear, I wanted to observe my parents' reaction first. They tried every tactic except admitting fault. Mom sent paragraphs about betrayal and hurt. Dad sent clipped messages about duty and responsibility. One read, "You can't just walk away from family obligations." I almost replied, "Watch me." Instead, I dialed Aunt Carol Sunday afternoon. She answered on the first ring. "Thank God, what's happening?" I told her everything, the move, the overheard conversation. Silence hung on the line. "I didn't expect you home," she admitted, softening slightly. "I know." Her exhale was long, weary. "Your mom. It wasn't meant that way. Didn't sound that way." Pause, then quieter, urgent. "You need to understand something about the house." My stomach clenched. "You mean my name's involved?" "No, your dad added you to the mortgage last year after his credit slipped. You signed papers. He said it was refinancing." I remembered signing, trusting his promise of lower payments. I hadn't read carefully. Blind trust. Aunt Carol's voice sharpened. "If the payments stop, it hits your credit. Everything is tied to you." I ended the call, sinking into the small couch in my studio, staring at the plain wall. I retrieved the old mortgage emails and documents. Co-borrower. Not just helping, they'd made me legally responsible. Later that night, Dad called again. I answered. Why didn't you tell me I was on the mortgage? Silence stretched, heavy and calculated. Temporary. The paperwork doesn't say that. You're overreacting. We needed approval. We're family. You used my credit. Family. The word used to excuse everything. I asked quietly, sharp as glass. If I'm family, why was I considered extra? He inhaled sharply. That conversation was private. Mine from the moment I overheard it. Then came the line that landed like a hammer. If you don't help with the payments, we lose the house. No pleading, no emotion. Practicality over humanity. I hung up. Sleep didn't come that night. Not guilt, not anger. Trapped. Morning, I requested a full copy of the mortgage agreement. 2 days later, my phone rang from an unknown number. My phone call with the bank left my hands shaking, cold as ice creeping up my arms. Miss Parker, we've been trying to reach the primary account holder for weeks, the woman said. The loan is already 2 payments behind. 2 payments. 2 months behind before I even left. My chest tightened. They hadn't been depending on me, they'd been drowning, and I had stepped out of the lifeboat without even realizing it. I swallowed hard. How far behind are they, really? A pause, the sound of typing, then 3 months total delinquency if the next payment is missed. Foreclosure review starts after that. 3 months. I had only been gone for 3 months. The timing wasn't coincidence. They stopped paying the moment I left. I thanked her and hung up, gripping the wheel as if it could anchor me. I drove toward the house. Not to enter, just to see. From the street, it looked untouched. Lawn mowed, porch light glowing, Mom's car in the driveway. Nothing betrayed the chaos that hid behind the walls. I sat across the street for almost an hour, heart hammering. Then Dad stepped out. He seemed thinner, fatigue etched deep into his face. He paced on the porch, phone pressed to his ear, running a hand through his hair, staring at the ground. I couldn't hear words, but the gesture was new. Dad, the man who always had solutions, the one who made every problem disappear, now seemed small, unmoored. I slipped away before he could notice me. That night, Mom called. This time, her tone was stripped of accusation. We need to talk. About what? I asked. The house. I told her I knew about the mortgage, the missed payments, the delinquency. Silence. Then, carefully, your father had business losses last year. How much? A lot. Why didn't you tell me? We didn't want to stress you. I laughed softly, bitter. They'd put me on the mortgage without explanation. Supposedly temporary. Everything temporary. Her voice cracked slightly. If we lose the house, we have nowhere to go. It should have broken me. Instead, I asked the question I never would have dared before. Why didn't you sell it when things started going wrong? Pause. Then, your father thought he could fix it. Fix what? She didn't answer directly. And then the truth landed like a hammer. He invested in something he shouldn't have. I felt it before she said the word. Crypto. The same year I was added to the mortgage. The same year he told me refinancing would stabilize everything. He hadn't been securing the house. He'd been gambling with it. And when it started collapsing, he quietly tethered me to the wreckage. I told Mom I would come by the next day. Walking into the kitchen, the same kitchen where I first heard them call me extra, it felt smaller now. Dad sat at the table, a stack of unopened envelopes before him. No smile, no shame. Just, we need your help. Not an apology. Not an admission. Just practical, controlled, the same authority he'd always wielded. And I realized something I'd never allowed myself to admit. They didn't regret the words they'd said to me. They regretted losing control. They believed still that I would step back into the role they had designed. They were wrong. But what came next surprised me. I sat across from him at the table. Envelopes lay unopened. Bank, utilities, law firm. But I didn't need to open them. Dad slid a paper across to me. A payment plan. Cover the next 2 months, we can catch up. I'll handle the rest. I looked at him steady. Figure out how. Leads, opportunities. Temporary setbacks, he said. The same words he used last year when things went sideways. Mom stood silently by the sink. Finally quiet. I asked the question I needed to hear. How much did you lose? He hesitated. Finally, the number? It was almost identical to the college fund they said had gone years ago to medical bills. Everything clicked. I said calmly, use my college savings for this. Silence. Mom's eyes glistened, but she said nothing. It wasn't supposed to go this way, Dad muttered. It doubled at first. I was going to return it all. You wouldn't have even known. I looked at him. But I do know. You put the house at risk. You put me on the mortgage. And you called me needy. That last word, steady, deliberate, hung in the air. It wasn't anger, and it wasn't sorrow, just facts, blunt and unyielding. Dad leaned back in his chair like I had thrown a punch at him without touching him. That was a private conversation, he said, voice tight. And you seemed almost relieved at the thought of me leaving. He rubbed his temples slowly like he was trying to erase the words from the air. Everything was chaotic. You became the problem. No one argued. No one denied it. The silence that followed weighed heavier than any accusation they had ever leveled at me. Finally, Mom spoke, voice wavering. We were scared. Scared. The word hit differently. They weren't villains. They were people who made reckless choices and then sought someone smaller, weaker, easier to blame. Someone expendable. Me. If I had stayed, I would have patched the cracks, covered the bills, kept the house afloat long enough for them to pretend nothing was wrong. I left and the walls began to collapse. Dad pushed the paper toward me again. 2 months, that's it. Just 2 months and we can catch up. I looked around the kitchen, the walls I'd painted myself in high school, the dented cabinet where a pan had fallen years ago. Everything suddenly felt like a stage set, a backdrop for a story I never signed up to star in. I stood. I'm not paying. Mom's voice cracked, nearly breaking. Emma, please. I didn't flinch. I'm removing myself from the mortgage. You can't just do that, Dad said. Watch me, he answered calmly. I walked out quietly. No yelling, no doors slammed, just a single deliberate choice that finally felt mine. Over the next few weeks, I consulted a lawyer. I learned more about financial liability than I ever wanted to know. Because I had signed under misleading circumstances, and because the deed didn't list me as an owner, there were options. Not simple, not convenient, but real options. The foreclosure process accelerated faster than they anticipated. Banks don't care about family, pride, or who is extra. 3 months later, a notice appeared taped to the front door. That night, Mom called. Not about money, not about logistics. Dad was crying. We have to leave, she said, and for the first time her voice carried genuine regret, not for the house, but for how they treated me. We should never have treated you that way. Too late. I had already signed a lease in another city. I hadn't told them about the move yet. While they packed 20 years of furniture into boxes, I folded my life into 2 suitcases in the back of my car. A job opportunity had come unexpectedly. 3 hours away, better pay, and a chance to start fresh. I signed the lease the same day they received the final foreclosure notice. Timing, strange as it was, felt almost deliberate. The last time I returned to that house, it barely resembled home. The living room echoed with emptiness. The walls bore marks where photos and frames had hung. Dad dismantled the dining table, the same table where they had once called me extra. Mom hugged me as I walked in. We were wrong. I stayed silent. Your father thought he was protecting us, she said softly. I thought keeping things quiet would keep you from worrying. We told ourselves you could handle more than we realized. I'm your daughter, I said, not your backup plan. Dad froze, older than I had ever seen him, smaller, exhausted in a way that had nothing to do with work. I messed up, he said at last, stripped of excuses. I should never have put you on that loan, never touched your college money, never made you feel like a burden. Clear, direct, honest. 3 months ago, those words might have changed everything. Now they were evidence that leaving had been the right choice. Where will you go? Aunt Carol has a spare room, Mom said. For now, the house that had anchored our family for decades belonged to someone else. A real estate sign was planted in the front yard. Dad walked me to the car. Are you coming back to visit? I hesitated. I don't know. He nodded. You deserved better. That sentence followed me all the way onto the highway. Monday, I started my new job. New apartment, new routines. No one monitoring my paycheck. No one calling me dramatic for needing space. A month later, Mom sent a photo. They were in Aunt Carol's backyard. Folding chairs, paper plates, Dad at the grill. We're figuring things out. Counseling started, she wrote. I stared at it for a long moment before replying. I'm glad. Now I could hear the regret in their voices. Every call, every question about my career instead of my bank account. In Dad's quiet, unprompted, I'm proud of you. But regret doesn't reverse time. The version of me who would have stayed, swallowed insults, and paid every bill? Gone. They wanted peace. I gave it to them. And for the first time, I kept some for myself. Some. For myself. Some. For myself. Some.